welcome to the Luna Practice, where we talk about all kinds of topics around the completion process and parts work. Today I have a really special guest with me. Her name is Victoria Abdelnur. She's a medical doctor and an integrative therapist, and she also uses the completion process in her practice, and I'm super happy to have her. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about how the medical community views childhood trauma, because in my opinion there's still so much focus on healing when actually of healing diseases, but not actually healing the root causes. And that's why I invited her, and I'm really happy to have you. So do you want to introduce yourself?
All right. So I studied medicine, medical, normal sciences in Argentina. But for some reason, I was always feeling a bit like an outsider because I consider health was affected by many factors that were not given so much importance in the university. And also, I was always thinking it would be so much better to help patients in teams, and in teams of people that do different things, not only doctors, but also shamans and therapists and all kinds of disciplines. Like, my focus was always on supporting the patients on the most effective way, no matter how. And in the university, I was getting the message, there is only one way to help them, and we are the ones who know best. And the first line of treatment is usually medication. Because everything else is just too much work, and it doesn't really work, and people don't react to it. People are just waiting more for a prescription. This is the message that we got. So I always felt very, like, since the beginning, a bit of an alien. And because I was very dysfunctional myself, in several ways. I had bulimia and depression. It was very hard for me to concentrate, even though I was very fast to understand subjects. The emotional problems got in the way. So I was always needing therapy myself. And I asked I consulted my professors, and my teachers would give me medication. So I was taking 7 pills when I was in my 20s, 7 pills per day, 7 different medications for all my symptoms. And I also thought, hey, this is not really working. If I'm in my 20s and taking 7 different pills, what is going to happen when I'm in my 40s or in my 50s? I hated to feel dependent on substances. I thought there must be better solutions. So there was a two-way reason why I was trying alternative things and learning alternative methods to heal myself and to help my patients to be more effective as a healer or a doctor. So that's what I did. I studied medicine, but I also learned a lot of alternative methods, and the ones that weren't helping or were a little bit bullshit, I left them on the side, and the ones that were effective, I kept them. So here I am. I don't know what else.
That's really wonderful, and I can really understand that you must have felt that way, because I always spent a lot of times actually at doctor's offices, because as a kid I was very sick. I didn't have like a severe sickness, but I had asthma and allergy and all kinds of like small things. So I was constantly there, and all the time when I was at the doctor's, I always thought, even as a child, why did they not ask me how I feel? Why did you not look into what's causing all of this? And I thought that I always just felt that they were so disconnected, and that patients are not being viewed as whole people. They are just being viewed as a disease or this or that. And now obviously as a CP practitioner myself, I'm really interested in mental health, and I know so many people that are suffering from mental health, and of course also even with physical disease, I more and more start to see what's actually the emotional reason or the trauma reason behind that. But yeah, I feel like the medical community is not really catching up to that. And we talked about it before. I really like Gabor Mate, and I think you like him as well.
Yes,
And
very much.
yeah, I think he's a real amazing example, because he really, really tries to get the message out there, like how important like childhood trauma is for the rest of your life. And what's your view on childhood trauma, like, and how do you think that the rest of the medical community is viewing it?
So in university, they never mentioned it. Like not even one time. There is so much lack of information about it. The medical universities are way, way, way behind. The things that we learned are the classifications that come in the manual of mental health, and to diagnose them, but they just say we don't really know the causes, and we don't really know the cures either. We are using this medication, and this is the latest, and this is the latest medication, and this is the latest, and sometimes mentioning other types of therapies without medication, but saying basically they don't really, really work. So it's a little bit of a bleak panorama. Although I must say that more and more young doctors are interested in holistic medicine and in working in teams and so on. It is beautiful to see. Nevertheless, I think that the more older medical community is really ignorant about it. And what else can I say? Now, of course, my point of view is very different because of my personal experience, and because studying how to help myself, I learned so much. And now I think that there are very good people like Gabor Mate and other scientists that are bringing knowledge. For example, adverse events in childhood are used. They can be measured. They are forms in which you can, when people answer how many adverse events they had in their childhood, they get a score, and the score is directly correlated to physical illnesses in adulthood. And I find that very useful. Yeah. I don't know. What else?
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense what you're saying. What I was also just thinking is that, like, I think a lot of the reason also why we don't necessarily want to correlate childhood trauma is because, and Gabor Mate talks about this a lot, is that we live in a very big of a, like a blaming society, you know, where, like, for example, he talks a lot about addiction, where he says that, oh, the responsibility is with you, like, you cannot just blame someone else that did something to you, on you, so you have to take the responsibility yourself. But basically it's like you are just blaming the victims of a situation, and like nobody can ever heal themselves through that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And also, while you were speaking, I was remembering that I think there are certain factors that work against health, and it is there is a big business in selling medication, and there isn't a very big business as in accumulation of wealth when you pay personal practitioners, you know. So for example, here in Germany, the health system gives you everything you need if you need medication, or if you need technology, you know, whatever technological thing, they pay it. It doesn't matter how many thousands of euros it costs. But if you need a therapy with a person, then there is all these obstacles and all these bots and all this. So I think the lobbies for the pharma industry and the technology machines industry are very powerful and very effective at influencing laws and at influencing decisions. But the I don't know, the Ärztekammer, which in English is the let's say the lobbies for doctors and therapists and masseurs and body workers and so on, are not strong at all. They don't have enough power to push for legislation that favors those therapies that would actually help the patients more.
Yeah.
So there are interests behind the focus of what causes illness. If the same with depression, you know, if you say depression is the lack of certain neurotransmitter, and you have that neurotransmitter in a pill and you can sell it, that's great, you know, for some people that earn a lot of money with that. But if you say actually depression has certain causes, for example, that kids don't have their parents enough because they have to work too much. They don't have enough free time to be with their kids. So that would have to that would imply to change the whole system in which people work less and are more with their kids. And you know, some very powerful people don't want that, you know, so they don't want to accept these are the reasons, you know, emotional neglect, the kids don't have enough time with their parents, adults work so much until burnout. There is this connection because there isn't enough time and investment in community work, in getting together, in connection, in the social structure, the family structure, and that is not put on the focus. So and it's not put on the focus because you have to change the whole system. Yeah, so it's better to say, no, is it because you don't have enough serotonin or you don't have enough oxytocin, and here's a pill for you, and go on and keep working.
Yeah, I absolutely agree what you're saying. It's such a vicious circle between money interests, and I think also having to face very uncomfortable truths about the society, the way we interact with each other. And also I think, yeah, like blame plays a role. Yeah, all this kind of stuff, definitely. And I also wrote out this quote from Dr. Mate, and he says that settling for the view that illness, mental or physical, are primarily genetic allows us to avoid disturbing questions about the nature of the society in which we live. If science enables us to ignore poverty or man-made toxins or a frenetic and stressful social culture as contributors to disease, we can look only to simple answers, pharmacological and biological. And that is also a bit how you said, like, he, I think, says because a lot of the medical community now is all about genes, you know, that the genetics are the reasons why you have all these diseases. For example, depression, I think, is a big thing where lots of people say, oh, it comes from your family line. But it's just a very like easy answer. And instead of having to look into this really very complicated social environment, basically.
Yes, and it also, like, people use genetics as another scientific form of determinism. It's like, oh, your destiny is to be like this because all your parents and grandparents were like this. And it's not true. It's not true. We know now that the factors of how you're raised, your environment, what the availability that you have to certain basic needs, all that has to do with mental health, you know, and those factors maybe are not so convenient for the system to be seen.
That's definitely true. So I also wanted to ask you a question that one other CP practitioner asked me to ask you, and it was, how do you present the completion process to scientific minds?
Oh my goodness. Let me see. I'm going to try and remember the last time I talked to a colleague about this. So So the first thing I say is that trauma is much more prevalent than we think. That it's not only that you were in a war, or you were raped, or you had a huge accident. It's also certain things that didn't happen in your childhood. For example, you didn't have enough presence from your parents, or some many times things that for us are very simple and not so important, for a child are very traumatic because they don't have the capacity or the support to process them. So I don't know, the death of a pet, change in schools, parents divorcing, parents not having a good relationship, all kinds of things are traumatic for a child and cause problems in the future. So first of all, that how prevalent it is and how much they affect our health and our mental health, our health in general, and our emotional mental health. So they open their eyes and they go like, oh, all right, really. And then I start talking about the relation of the trauma and the physical illnesses that they cause. And they start agreeing because they see in their practices that even though they give the recommended therapy to the patients, they come over and over, and the symptoms don't really ever go away completely. And also that people need to talk, and they don't have enough time to talk. So they start thinking, okay, when I cannot deal with these symptoms, then I can send the patients to you. Yeah, because you have time to talk to them and to listen to them. That has happened to me. They know that there are factors that have to do with stress and emotional problems, but they don't know how to deal with them, so they send them to me. And the completion process specifically, I tell them those traumas that we talked about in childhood can be healed. We can bring healing to those traumas when we allow a safe space and enough time for a person, and a deep, deep relaxation, and with eyes closed, then the subconscious becomes more accessible, and those things that maybe they have forgotten about and are the causes of certain painful patterns in the present are accessible, and they come up in the form of images or memories. And then we go deep into like an internal trip into their childhood, and we give healing and support to that child that was feeling alone and confused and in pain. And we end up the session only when the person is feeling all right, is feeling good, is feeling that there was a completion. So the session is usually much longer than a normal psychotherapy session. And I have all the time they need until they finish. So I usually see 2 or 3 patients only per day. And they go like, wow. And right, especially because they only have like 5 or 15 minutes to see each patient, so they're like, wow, they get interested with this. That's more or less how I communicate it.
Yeah, I can. Wow, I think that's a really, really good explanation. Thank you for that. I will take that away also a lot from it. And my last question to you is, how do you view Teal Swan and her knowledge about trauma?
Well, I think she's incredibly wise. She's wonderfully intelligent and perceptive. She's pretty amazing. Yes. When she talks, she has such insights. Of course, she probably learns a lot from other people, but also she integrates everything, and she has such insight. And in her workshops, it's like she is sharing deep and super up-to-date modern psychological tools, she's more up to date in psychology. I think that so many psychoanalysts and psychotherapists, and she doesn't have a title, but prove that sometimes it's even better because she's more open-minded, you know, and she gives you exactly what she sees, everything she learned. And also she has this personal experience that was so traumatic that if she got better from that, like anyone can get better. That's interesting, like insurance. So I really, really like her. I really respect her. She's also very generous. You know, I trained with her and I met her a little bit like behind the scenes, and I found her really authentic and generous and careful. So I really, really like her.
Yeah, for me it was the completely same impression. And
Mm.
sometimes because I'm also very interested in feminism, and I think a part of the reason also why someone like Teal, who is very intuitive and very smart, but also she was not trained in the system. And what people always forget is that like science is not unbiased. That's not true, because it is so like culture biases science, right? And who were all the scientists, and especially the psychologists, you know, who started modern psychology? They were all a very specific type of group. So like, you know, men, like all the men, and they also have their shadows and their patterns and things they are not seeing. And that's what I like a lot about Till. I think her views are so fresh, and a lot, I think, about these, for example, the topics like sexuality. She has so many videos about this because she's not shying away from this, you know.
Mm.
And that's what I find really, really wonderful about her.
Yes, I I agree. There is a little anecdote I would like to share, and it's I did a course on trauma, and I learned it with a psychologist and a professor from the Free University of Berlin. And he used mostly an author that I don't remember his name right now, but he was a psychologist at the same, no, he was a doctor at the same time that Freud was developing his theory. So they were contemporaneous. And he talked and wrote books about trauma and about psychological trauma. And when you read them now, they are so modern. Like, it's like, wow, the evolution of the understanding of trauma is getting to the point that this guy was at like 150 years ago. And I was asking, like, why are we learning this now? And he wasn't famous in his time. He was also a scientist and also a doctor and so on. And my teacher said because he was not good at networking and he wasn't charismatic. He was, everything he knew was sound scientifically, but he couldn't transmit it to the community, the scientific community, and therefore he didn't become famous. On the opposite spectrum, a woman became famous later on with his view on trauma. And one of the main things that she said was, parents are not to blame, let's say, for their sons and daughters' mental problems. Yeah? And it's not that we want to say, oh, there is the guilty party and so on. Everybody's doing the best they can. But I can surely say that parents have a lot of responsibility on how their kids come out, right? But this woman who became super famous was saying, no, it's not true. Parents don't have so much responsibility. It's completely different causes. And this woman's son had committed suicide. And she developed her theories after her son committed suicide. So how is there no common sense as to understanding how biased was her theory? And even though so, she became so famous and relevant in psychotherapy. So always, always keep an open mind and keep eyes open as to who is this person who is pushing this theory, and, you know, be a little bit critical of everything, yeah, before you just adopt it because it's the latest trend.
Wow, I think that was the perfect ending sentences of you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything. Yeah, staying critical and staying open-minded. And I bet that in 100 years, you know, we will look back at what has happened now and think, oh my gosh, like how did we treat children? How did we treat mental and physical illness? and will find it quite ridiculous. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you.
That was my interview this week. I hope you really like it. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the medical community and trauma. I would really like to know. All the best, guys. Bye.